Commander Riley Martinez had what you might call a reputation problem. And by reputation problem, I mean she was the kind of pilot who thought tactical retreat was just another way of saying I haven't blown up enough stuff yet. The brass had given her the charming nickname Reckless, which she wore like a badge of honor right up until her last mission ended with one stolen dreadnought, 3 destroyed space stations, and a diplomatic incident that made the evening news on 17 different worlds. So here she was, demoted from fleet commander to what her orders cheerfully called diplomatic escort duty, which was military speak for babysitting. Specifically, babysitting Ambassador Klaxon of the Zephyrian Republic, a pompous blue-skinned windbag who looked like someone had crossed a peacock with a tax auditor and given the result delusions of grandeur. Commander Martinez Klaxon announced as he boarded her ship, the Wandering Star, with all the enthusiasm of someone stepping in something unpleasant. I trust you understand the critical importance of these peace negotiations. The fate of 3 star systems hangs in the balance. I do hope you can manage to transport us without your usual, shall we say, theatrical flourishes. Riley gave him her brightest smile, the one that made seasoned pirates reach for their weapons. Don't worry, Ambassador. I promise this will be the most boring flight of your life. Klaxon's entourage filed aboard behind him like a parade of the galaxy's most uptight beings. There was Captain Thorne, a 4-armed Vraxian who served as security chief and had the personality of a particularly grumpy boulder. Dr. Nexus, a crystalline whose translucent body flickered with nervous energy patterns, and Diplomat Whisper, a shade whose name was literally the only thing anyone could hear when she spoke, which made conversations interesting. The Wandering Star wasn't exactly what you'd call impressive. She was a beat-up courier ship that had seen better decades, with hull plating that had more patches than original metal and engines that sounded like they were arguing with each other. But she was fast, maneuverable, and most importantly, she was what Riley had been assigned after her last commanding officer had specifically requested she be given something she can't possibly turn into a weapon of mass destruction. Challenge accepted. Riley settled into the pilot's seat and started the pre-flight sequence. Around her, the diplomatic team strapped themselves in with the kind of careful precision that suggested they'd done their research on her flying style. Smart aliens. Wandering Star to Harmony Station Control, Riley said into her comm. Requesting departure clearance for diplomatic convoy Zeta-7. Convoy Zeta-7, you are cleared for departure. Safe travels, Commander. Riley grinned and fired up the engines. Behind her, she could hear Klaxon muttering something about hoping his insurance was up to date. The Wandering Star lifted off from the orbital platform and fell into formation with her escort fleet, 2 destroyers and a heavy cruiser, all shiny and new and crewed by pilots who probably still had their original ships. See, Riley called back to her passengers as they cleared the system's gravity well, smooth as diplomatic silk. We'll have you at Harmony Falls in 3 days. And the most exciting thing that'll happen is Klaxon's speeches about interstellar cooperation. That's when the proximity alarm started screaming. Unknown vessels dropping out of hyperspace, reported the lead destroyer. Multiple contacts, moving to intercept. Riley's grin widened. Scratch that comment about boring. Pirates, Captain Thorne growled, his 4 arms already reaching for weapons that weren't there. Standard rating pattern. They'll demand tribute and be on their way. Riley was studying her sensor readings with the kind of intense focus she usually reserved for targeting computers. I don't think so, Captain. Look at their formation. That's not random rating. That's military precision. The lead pirate ship opened communications, and the face that appeared on screen made Riley's blood run cold. Admiral Voss of the Hegemony, humanity's most persistent enemy, and the owner of a personal grudge against Riley that dated back to the whole dreadnought incident. Well, Voss said, his scarred face splitting into an unpleasant grin. Commander Reckless Martinez. I was hoping I'd run into you again. Admiral, Riley replied sweetly. Still upset about that time I stole your flagship and used it to redecorate your fleet? Because I have to say, the explosions really brought out your ship's best features. Voss's grin turned nastier. Surrender the diplomatic vessel, Martinez. Hand over the peace delegation. and I might let you live long enough to stand trial. Counteroffer, Riley said. How about you take your ships and shove them up your... The transmission cut off as Voss opened fire. Riley threw the wandering star into a diving spiral, just as the space around them erupted in plasma fire. Her escort fleet tried to respond, but they'd been caught completely off guard. The heavy cruiser lasted about 30 seconds before a coordinated missile strike turned it into an expanding cloud of debris. The destroyers managed maybe twice that long. Evasive maneuvers. Klaxon shrieked from behind her, which was about as useful as telling Riley to breathe. Already on it, Riley snapped, pulling the ship through a corkscrew turn that would have impressed a drunk acrobat. The wandering star groaned in protest, but held together. Mostly. This is impossible, Dr. Nexus chimed, his crystalline body flashing rapid panic patterns. They knew exactly where we'd be. This was planned. Riley dodged another barrage of plasma fire and swore creatively in 3 languages. Of course it was planned. The hegemony doesn't want peace talks. They want this war to keep going, and they want the diplomats dead. Then we surrender, Klaxon declared. Diplomatic immunity must be preserved. Diplomatic immunity? Riley laughed, spinning the ship around a piece of destroyer wreckage. Ambassador, these people just blew up 3 military vessels in neutral space. I don't think they're particularly concerned about your immunity. Captain Thorne was studying the tactical display with the grim expression of someone doing math they didn't like. 17 ships. Heavy cruisers, fast attack craft, and a dreadnought. We're outnumbered, outgunned, and in a courier ship with no weapons. Thanks for the pep talk, Captain Riley said, throwing the ship into another evasive pattern. Really boosts morale. I'm stating facts. Human tactics are reckless and unpredictable, but this is beyond even your species' usual disregard for probability. Riley felt something click in her brain, the same feeling she'd had right before stealing that dreadnought. It was the feeling of a plan so insane it just might work, or get them all killed spectacularly, which was honestly just as good. You know what, Captain? You're absolutely right. Human tactics are reckless and unpredictable. She grinned at the tactical display. And that's exactly what's going to get us out of this. Behind her, she heard Klaxon whimper. Ahead of her, Admiral Voss's fleet was moving to surround them. And in her head, Riley was already planning the most ridiculous escape in galactic history. The wandering star shuddered as a near-miss scorched her hull plating. Riley's hands danced over the controls, and for the first time since this disaster started, she began to smile. Strap in, everyone. Things are about to get interesting. Define interesting, Captain Thorne demanded, his forearms gripping his restraints as Riley threw the ship through another impossible maneuver. Well, Riley said conversationally, dodging a missile that passed close enough to count the rivets, I'm thinking we fake our death. Hide in that debris field. Jury-rig some weapons from the diplomatic luggage, and then systematically turn Voss's own fleet against him. The silence from her passengers was deafening. That's your plan? Klaxon's voice went up about 3 octaves. We're going to pretend to be dead? It's worked before, Riley shrugged, pulling the ship into the expanding wreckage of the heavy cruiser. Admittedly, not usually with this many witnesses, but there's a first time for everything. She cut the engines and powered down all non-essential systems. The wandering star went dark and started drifting with the debris, just another piece of wreckage in the expanding cloud of destroyed ships. Motion sensors offline, heat signatures minimal, Riley whispered. Everyone stay very quiet and try not to think too loudly. Some of these hegemony scanners can pick up brain activity. That's not scientifically possible. Dr. Nexus chimed softly. Neither was stealing a dreadnought with a maintenance shuttle. But that didn't stop me, Riley replied. Through the viewports, they could see Voss's ship sweeping through the debris field, searching for survivors. One of the heavy cruisers passed close enough that they could see the crew through its bridge windows. They're jamming all communications, Thorne reported quietly. Even if we could get a message out, help is days away. Who said anything about calling for help? Riley was already moving toward the cargo hold. We're going to help ourselves. Diplomat whisper. What exactly is in your diplomatic luggage? The Shade's response was, as always, barely audible. Whisper. I'll take that as classified but probably useful, Riley grinned. Dr. Nexus, I need you to interface with the ship's computer. Captain Thorne, start stripping panels from the cargo bay. We're going to build ourselves some surprises. This is insanity, Claxon protested. We should wait for rescue. Ambassador, Riley said patiently. In about 6 hours, Voss is going to finish his sweep and head for Harmony Falls to ambush the peace talks. If those negotiations fail, this war continues for another decade. How many people die while we're waiting for rescue? Claxon opened his mouth to argue, then closed it again. Even pompous diplomats occasionally had moments of clarity. Besides, Riley continued, opening Whisper's luggage to reveal what looked like enough exotic technology to outfit a small army. Where's the fun in playing it safe? Over the next 3 hours, Riley turned the Wandering Star's cargo hold into what could charitably be described as a weapons laboratory, or less charitably as a death trap waiting to happen. She jury-rigged plasma conduits from Dr. Nexus's medical equipment, turned Claxon's ceremonial staff into a targeting array, and somehow convinced Captain Thorne's security armor to interface with the ship's sensor grid. This will never work, Thorne muttered, watching Riley weld a diplomatic gift from the Crystalline Union onto what used to be the ship's coffee maker. Human engineering is chaos pretending to be science. That's the beauty of it. Riley grinned, sparks flying from her improvised welding torch. Hegemony tactics are all about predictability. Mathematical probability, calculated responses, logical outcomes. They've studied every standard military doctrine in the galaxy. She stepped back to admire her handiwork, a weapon that looked like it had been designed by a committee of insane artists and built by caffeinated engineers. But they've never studied the human doctrine of hold my beer and watch this. Dr. Nexus's body flickered with what Riley had learned to recognize as amusement patterns. Commander, I'm beginning to understand why your species has such an alarming reputation. Alarming? Riley powered up her improvised weapons array and watched the readings climb into the red zone. Wait until you see what we do for an encore. Attention Hegemony Fleet, Riley broadcast on all frequencies. This is Commander Martinez aboard the diplomatic vessel Wandering Star. We surrender unconditionally and request safe passage for our diplomatic passengers. Admiral Voss's face appeared on screen, looking smugly satisfied. About time, Martinez. Power down your engines and prepare to be boarded. Of course, Admiral. We're just a helpless courier ship full of terrified diplomats. What could we possibly do against your mighty fleet? Riley cut the transmission and turned to her passengers, all of whom were staring at her like she'd lost her mind. Which, to be fair, was a reasonable assumption. Trust me, she said, hands dancing over her improvised control console. This is going to be spectacular. The first Hegemony boarding shuttle approached the Wandering Star cautiously, scanning for weapons and finding nothing that registered on their sensors. Which was the point. Riley's jury-rigged systems were built from diplomatic equipment and medical supplies, none of which appeared threatening to military scanners. Boarding Shuttle Tango 7. You are clear to dock, Riley announced helpfully. The shuttle clamped onto their airlock, and Riley waited until she heard the magnetic seals engage before pressing a button that shouldn't have existed on any civilian ship. The diplomatic gift from the Crystalline Union turned out to be a resonance amplifier designed for ceremonial music. When connected to the ship's hull and powered by medical equipment, it became something else entirely, a localized EMP generator that fried every piece of electronics on the boarding shuttle. Boarding Shuttle Tango 7, please report, came Voss's voice over the comm. Riley responded by activating her second surprise. Claxon's ceremonial staff, when properly modified, made an excellent signal booster. Combined with the ship's communication array and powered by Captain Thorne's security armor, it could broadcast on frequencies that weren't supposed to exist, including the command frequencies used by Hegemony Fleet coordination systems. This is Admiral Voss, Riley said in a perfect imitation of his voice, thanks to the vocal modulation software Dr. Nexus had contributed. All ships, execute Order 77. Repeat, execute Order 77. There was a moment of confused silence from the hegemony fleet. Admiral, please confirm Order 77, came a nervous voice from one of the cruisers. Riley grinned and looked up Order 77 in the hegemony tactical database she'd hacked using diplomatic immunity codes. Order 77. In the event of enemy infiltration of fleet communications, all ships are to fire on any vessel that fails to respond with proper authentication codes within 30 seconds. She cut the fake transmission and sat back to watch the show. Admiral, called another ship. Please respond with authentication. Voss's actual voice came over the comm, furious and confused. What are you talking about? I'm right here. Unknown vessel claiming to be Admiral Voss, Riley broadcast in her fake Admiral voice. You are suspected of being an enemy infiltrator. All ships, open fire. What followed was the most beautiful example of chaos theory Riley had ever witnessed. Half the hegemony fleet opened fire on the other half, convinced they were shooting at enemy infiltrators. Ships that had been perfectly coordinated moments before began attacking each other with military precision. This is impossible, Claxon whispered, watching heavy cruisers exchange fire at point-blank range. You can't turn an entire fleet against itself with one fake transmission. You can if they're paranoid enough, Riley replied cheerfully. The hegemony trains their crews to follow orders without question, and to assume everyone who doesn't follow proper protocol is an enemy. It's very efficient, right up until someone starts giving contradictory orders. Captain Thorne was studying the tactical display with something approaching admiration. 17 ships reduced to 11 in 4 minutes. Human tactics are terrifying. We're not done yet, Riley said, powering up the Wandering Star's engines. It's time for Phase 2. She fired up her final improvised weapon, a targeting system built from Ambassador Whisper's translation device and powered by the ship's main reactor. It couldn't shoot anything, but it could paint targets with enough precision to make the remaining hegemony ships think they were being illuminated by weapons they couldn't detect. Riley painted 3 different ships simultaneously, then broadcast another fake order, unknown stealth vessels detected. All ships engage painted targets immediately. The remaining hegemony fleet, already panicked and confused, opened fire on each other with renewed enthusiasm. Commander Dr. Nexus said, his crystalline body flickering with patterns Riley couldn't identify. Sure, you've just turned advanced military tactics into a form of psychological warfare. That's the thing about humans, Riley grinned, watching Admiral Voss's dreadnought trading fire with its own escort cruisers. We don't just think outside the box. We blow up the box and build something else from the pieces. Admiral Voss had finally figured out what was happening, but by then he only had 3 ships left, including his dreadnought. The rest of his fleet was either destroyed or drifting powerless after being pounded by their own allies. Martinez. His voice over the comm was pure rage. You think you're clever turning my fleet against itself? Let's see how clever you are against a dreadnought. Riley looked at her tactical display. One beat-up courier ship versus a massive warship bristling with weapons. The smart play would be to run. The safe play would be to hide. The human play? Challenge accepted, Riley grinned. She fired up the Wandering Star's engines and headed straight for the dreadnought. Commander, Captain Thorne said with the careful tone of someone talking to a potentially dangerous lunatic. That ship outmasses us by a factor of 50. Its shields alone could survive a direct hit from our entire improvised arsenal. You're thinking like a Varaxian, Riley replied, pushing the engines past their safety limits. All logic and probability calculations. But I've been watching you, Captain, all of you, and I've learned something. She threw the ship into a spiraling attack run that would have been impossible for any ship larger than a fighter. Plasma fire filled the space around them, but Riley danced through it like she was performing a ballet. Zephyrians are natural diplomats. You think in terms of negotiation and compromise. Dr. Nexus, your people are scientists. You see patterns and connections everywhere. Diplomat whisper. The shades are natural spies. You think in terms of information and secrets. The dreadnought's main guns swiveled to track them, but the wandering star was too small and too fast, slipping through the gaps in their targeting solution like water through a sieve. And Captain Thorne, Vraxians are tactical geniuses. You see every possible outcome and choose the most efficient path. Riley pulled the ship into a stomach-churning dive that brought them within meters of the dreadnought's hull. But humans? We don't think in terms of what's possible. We think in terms of what would be really, really cool if it worked. She fired every improvised weapon they had directly into the dreadnought's hangar bay. The resonance amplifier overloaded their magnetic containment fields. The signal booster turned their own communication array into a feedback loop that fried their command systems. And Klaxon's modified ceremonial staff somehow convinced their artificial intelligence that it was under attack by its own crew. The dreadnought's hangar bay exploded outward, venting atmosphere and launching fighters into space like confetti. Emergency bulkheads slammed shut throughout the ship as internal systems began fighting each other. Impossible, Voss snarled over the comm. You can't destroy a dreadnought with a courier ship. Who said anything about destroying it? Riley laughed, pulling away from the dying warship. I'm not trying to blow you up, Admiral. I'm trying to embarrass you. The dreadnought's engine sputtered and died, its weapons powered down. Its shields collapsed. In the space of 30 seconds, Admiral Voss's mighty flagship had been reduced to a very expensive piece of space junk. This is Admiral Voss to remaining fleet units, came a defeated voice over the comm. Stand down. Repeat, stand down. Riley opened a channel to the crippled dreadnought. Admiral, this is Commander Martinez. You're officially my prisoner. Your fleet is destroyed. And I'm pretty sure this whole incident is going to end up as a case study at the Naval Academy. Any last words? There was a long pause. How? Voss asked finally. How does one human in a civilian ship defeat an entire battle fleet? Riley looked back at her passengers, all of whom were staring at her with expressions ranging from awe to terror. I had help, she said simply. Turns out when you combine human stubbornness with alien wisdom, you get something new, something better. She turned the wandering star toward Harmony Falls, where the peace talks were waiting. Something the galaxy has never seen before. The arrival of the wandering star at Harmony Falls caused what diplomatic historians would later describe as a bit of a stir. The fact that Commander Riley Martinez had single-handedly defeated an entire hegemony battle fleet while escorting a diplomatic mission made the evening news on every civilized world in the galaxy. The fact that she'd done it using jury-rigged weapons built from diplomatic luggage made her a legend. Commander Martinez. Admiral Morrison said as he pinned the Distinguished Service Cross to her uniform, your actions have prevented a war, saved the peace talks, and captured one of our most wanted enemies. On behalf of the Human Defense Force, I'm proud to restore your rank and offer you any assignment in the fleet. Riley stood at attention in the station's main conference room, surrounded by diplomats, military officers, and reporters from 17 different species. Behind her, Ambassador Klaxon and his team waited to give their testimony to the Peace Commission. Thank you, Admiral, Riley said formally. I'm honored to serve. Any assignment, Commander. Name it. Riley's grin was pure mischief. Actually, sir, I'd like to stay in diplomatic escort duty. The room fell silent. Admiral Morrison blinked. Excuse me? What? These peace talks are just the beginning, Riley explained. The galaxy is changing. Humans are part of something bigger now, something that includes all of us. She gestured to her alien companions. I want to be part of that change. Ambassador Klaxon stepped forward, his pompous demeanor replaced by something approaching respect. Commander Martinez saved our lives and our mission. If she wishes to continue as our escort, the Zephyrian Republic would be honored to have her. Captain Thorne's 4 arms crossed in what Riley had learned was a Vraxian salute. The human demonstrates that true tactics come not from following rules, but from understanding when to break them. Dr. Nexus flickered with approval patterns. Her methods may be unorthodox, but the results speak for themselves. Diplomat Whisper said something that was, as always, barely audible, but the universal translator rendered it as she makes even boring diplomatic missions interesting. Admiral Morrison looked around the room, then back at Riley. Very well, Commander. You'll have a new ship, a proper crew, and all the diplomatic missions you can handle. He paused. Try not to start any wars. No promises, sir, Riley grinned. 3 weeks later, Commander Riley Martinez stood on the bridge of her new ship, the Diplomatic Solution, watching her crew prepare for their next mission. It was another routine escort job, transporting trade negotiators to a minor border world where two species were arguing over mining rights. Commander, her new first officer reported, we're receiving a distress call from the merchant convoy we're supposed to escort. They're under attack by unknown vessels. Riley settled into her captain's chair and smiled. Around her, her crew, half human, half alien, waited for orders. They'd all heard the stories. They knew what they'd signed up for. Unknown vessels, you say? Riley's grin widened. Well, that sounds interesting. All hands, this is the captain. We're about to show the galaxy what happens when you mess with a diplomatic mission. She looked at her tactical display, where red blips were converging on the merchant convoy. And remember, people, we're not just representing humanity out here. We're representing the idea that different species can work together to accomplish impossible things. The Diplomatic Solution leaped into hyperspace, racing toward another routine mission that was about to become anything but routine. Behind them, Admiral Morrison watched their departure from the station's observation deck and shook his head. I have a feeling, he muttered, that I'm going to be getting some very interesting reports from Commander Martinez. He was right. But that's a story for another day.